What's up, everyone? Caught here with another Yu-Gi-Oh deck profile. This time we're going to review the Ancient Gear deck that I've built. So it's another machine deck, Earth attribute. Annoying to play up against, that's for sure, because it pretty much all these monsters, if they attack, your opponent can't use spell or trap cards until after the damage is done. So you basically got a clean shot at the monster unless it activates one of its own effects. So let's get into it, I guess. So the real aim is to get out our fusion monsters, our heavies. Lots of attack power and some pretty nasty effects as well. But we'll get into them last. But let's start at the start. Let's begin with looking at some key monster cards. We're not going to look at every single card in the deck. That'll take too long. We'll just look at some key cards. So let's start with Ancient Gear Wyvern. 4-star, obviously machine type, 1700 attack, 1200 defense. If it's normal or special summoned, you can add one Ancient Gear card from your deck to your hand, except for Ancient Gear Wyvern. Now, you can't set cards for the rest of the turn, but that's totally fine. If we were to add a card, well, we can grab any Ancient Gear card we want. Logical choice would probably be Ancient Gear Fusion, because then we could go into, obviously, our fusion monsters. Other than that, we could even go into Ancient Gear Hunting Hound, because we could use that to fuse our monsters to bring out our big guys. So that's another option. Of course, you can grab whatever you want, but they're the most logical options. All right, let's move on. Ancient Gear Frame. So similar stats, 1600 attack, pretty pathetic 500 defense, but that's totally cool. Its effect, however, is pretty awesome. We'll read the whole thing because it's got 2 awesome effects, or 3, or however many it's got. Now, if you discard a card, you can add an Ancient Gear Golem, which is our heavy non-fusion monster of 3000 attack. We'll get back to him. Or any spell or trap that specifically lists the card name Ancient Gear Golem, which would be Ancient Gear Fusion. So that's what we'd be going for. And then obviously go into our fusion plays. Similar theme with all the other Ancient Gear cards. If it attacks, your opponent cannot use spell or trap cards until after the damage step. But it's also got a really cool effect in that if this face-up card in its owner's control leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, so pretty much anything but battle, you can special summon up to 3 Ancient Gear Golem or Ancient Gear Golem Ultimate Pound from your hand, ignoring their summoning conditions. So that's awesome if you got a bunch of them, or even just one of them in your hand, because your opponent won't want you to keep discarding cards and keep adding golems to your hand and or Ancient Gear Fusion. So this card's awesome. It might even be arguably better than Ancient Gear Wyvern. Both good searching options. The downside, however, is you have to discard a card, but that even in itself is not that bad, depending on what you've already got in your hand. We'll get back into that later. Moving on. Another good search option off of Wyvern was Ancient Gear Hunting Hound. Now, Hunting Hound is only 3-star, 1000 attack, 1000 defense, so it's pretty bad. If it's normal summoned, you can inflict 600 effect damage to your opponent. If the card attacks, they can't do spells or traps until the end of the damage steps. But the real ability here that we're after is, once per turn, you can fusion summon 1 Ancient Gear Fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters from your hand or field as materials. So it's basically a polymerization, which does the same thing. Fuse monsters from your hand or field. The difference is, though, there's nothing saying you can't use Hunting Hound himself. So that would be better than Polymerization over here. All right, last monster that's not a fusion is Ancient Gear Golem. So that's our heavy. He's a whopping 3,000 attack defense, 8-star. So normally it costs us 2 tributes. However, if we had Gear Town on the field, it would only be 1 tribute because both players can summon Ancient Gear monsters for 1 less tribute. And then if that card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 Ancient Gear monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard, which is awesome. Unfortunately, you wouldn't be able to use that on Gear Golem because it doesn't say ignoring its summoning conditions. Gear Golem immediately states that it cannot be special summoned. There are cards that can let us do that though. Now, if it attacks, your opponent cannot activate spell or trap cards until the end of the damage step, which is awesome and a common theme through the deck. That's why it's annoying to play against. But on top of that, if this card attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing battle damage. So that means the difference between Golem's attack points and their defense points will be deducted from their life points. So for those of you who don't know the rules, say Ancient Gear Hunting Hound was in defense mode, which is normally in a sideways position there. So if we attacked with Golem onto Hunting Hound, who only has 1,000 defense, our opponent would take 2,000 damage, which is a lot when you only have 8,000 points. Right, okay, so now let's get into the spells. We're only going to have a look at the fusion spells, pretty much, and Gear Town. So let's start with a great card to draw early in Future Fusion. So it's a spell card. Has a little infinity symbol there. So infinity symbol means it's going to stay on the field. Continuous. It's a continuous spell card. So basically you play this and then you will send whatever monsters you need from your deck to your graveyard, right? After you've selected which fusion monster you want to go into. And then on your next turn, you'll have it out on the field. However, the crutch of it is, if this card's destroyed, Future Fusion, then that monster also goes, and vice versa. But it's awesome in that you can use stuff from your deck that's not in your hand. So that's awesome. It's a great card to draw earlier. It's not as good late because your deck is probably going to be running out of materials and you want to be drawing those most likely. So we already had a look at Polymerization early. It's the easiest one to just explain. You fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion materials. Power Bond is basically the same thing, except you can only use it on a machine fusion monster using materials from your hand or field. But the big difference is Power Bond will let you gain attack equal to the original attack of that monster. However, the downside is during the end phase of that turn that you activate this card, you're going to take that damage equal to the amount of attack gained from this effect at the time of the summon. So let's use Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem as an example. If we play Power Bonded, it will be on a whopping 8,800 attack points, which that's more attack points than they have life points. So if we had a clean shot, it's 100% worth it because the game would be over and we wouldn't have to take the 4,400 damage. So yeah, definitely a worthwhile card because we can do a lot of damage, especially when we have piercing damage on some of our bigger guys. So let's move into the... let's move into Overload before we get into Ancient Gear Fusion. Overload Fusion is a really good card, but it's best played later. Why is that? It's because, unlike the first 3 cards, and even Ancient Gear Fusion, we use materials from our graveyard as well as field. So, if we're smart, we'll try and load up our graveyard and then play Overload Fusion, because we don't want to give up stuff from the field, because we want to keep it on the field to protect our life points, get our effects off, and maybe use those for materials later. So, fusion summon one dark machine monster, fusion monster from your extra deck. We've only got the one, but we've got 2 copies of Chaos Ancient Gear Giant, which we'll get into him later. So, and he's a good one to really finish off your opponents. So that's Overload Fusion. That's best played after we've played a couple of these already and put our monsters, materials into our graveyard. So, speaking of that, we have Ancient Gear Fusion. Fusion summon one Ancient Gear Fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. So the same thing as Polymerization and Power Bond, only if you use Ancient Gear Golem or Ancient Gear Golem Ultimate Pound you control as fusion material, you can also use monsters from your deck as material. So that's awesome. So if you have one of them on the field, then you can just go into your deck, which will be there, and do that instead. You'd have to have Golem on the field, though. That shouldn't be too hard, though. So, yeah. All right, we're running out a bit of time here. I'd like to keep this under 15 minutes. So let's get into the last 2 spell traps. Gear Town. Now, this card will definitely help us get Golem on the field because, as I may have explained earlier, you can normal summon Ancient Gear monsters for 1 less tribute. So if we have a look at Golem, he's got 8 stars. So 7 or 8 stars means we've got to sacrifice 2 monsters to get him on the field. It's hard to special summon him. So yeah, that's usually how we're going to have to get him on the field. 5 or 6 stars is only 1, and then 4 or below is just no tributes. When this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon an Ancient Gear monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard. So say this got destroyed, right, by either you or your opponent, and you had Golem in your hand, you could then use that monster to sacrifice and then go into Golem, which would pair really, really well with Ancient Gear Fusion. Alright, the lone trap that we're going to be showing off is Storming Mirror Force. Arguably the best Mirror Force card. So regular Mirror Force states that when your opponent's monster declares an attack, destroy that attacking monster or all attack position monsters and send them to the graveyard. This does the exact same thing except return all your opponent's attack position monsters to their hand. Now, why would that be better? Why would sending monsters to the hand be better? Well, because they're simply not in the graveyard, and they can't activate, say, effects in the graveyard. They can't be special summoned from the graveyard. If they're in the hand, yeah, they could maybe do some effects in the hand, or be special summoned again. But if we return a lot of attack position monsters back to their hand, we might have to force them to throw them out anyway. But yeah, anyway, that is the trap we're running. So there is some of the cards in the main deck, some key cards. Let's get into our fusion monsters. So let's start right now with Ancient Gear Megaton Golem. So it requires 3 Ancient Gear monsters. If this card attacks, your opponent cannot activate spell or trap cards until the end of the damage step. Same with the others, pretty much. If it was fusion summoned using 2 or more Ancient Gear Golems, or Ultimate Pounds, it can attack up to that many times during the battle phase. Now, if this card in its owner's control leaves the field because of a card effect, you can special summon an Ancient Gear Golem from your extra deck. An Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem from your extra deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. So that would be this card right here. Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem. You need an Ancient Gear Golem plus 2 Ancient Gear monsters. So it's specific, unlike the previous card, which said just 3 Ancient Gear monsters. Now, it must be fusion summoned, so you can't special summon it, except for the previous effect. Now, if this card attacks a defense position, inflict piercing battle damage. If this card attacks, your opponent can't activate spell trap cards. If this card is destroyed, you can target an Ancient Gear Golem in your graveyard, special summon it, ignoring its summoning conditions. which is awesome. Yeah, so normally what I'd do is I'd fusion summon, I'd bring out Megaton Golem first, and then if it ever got destroyed by card effect, most likely, because it's unlikely to get beaten by battle with 3,300 or more attack points, I would then be able to go into Gear Golem. Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem. Alright, last monster is Chaos Ancient Gear Giant. Probably my favourite of the three. We have another one, we won't review it. So this one will cost you 4 Ancient Gear monsters, which is awesome though, because it doesn't say specific ones, unlike Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem, which will cost you a Ancient Gear Golem. Now, this one's a bit different to the previous cards, or all the cards to be honest. Can't be special summoned by other ways, has to be fusion summoned. This card is unaffected by spell or trap effects. Your opponent's monsters cannot activate their effects during the battle phase, which means we're safe to attack with this thing. This card can attack all your monsters. It can attack all monsters your opponent controls, once each. If this card attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing battle damage to your opponent. Now, with 4,500 attack points, it's going to do some serious damage, especially if we played Power Bond on it, or Limiter Removal, which will double its attack points as well. Either way, we're going to do crap tons of damage, and I can't see us losing if we played Chaos Ancient Gear Giant, especially later in the game. So, yeah. That is our deck review. I hope you guys enjoyed. Still working on it, still trying to get good at this. The more I do, the better I'll get. Trying to take big breaks in between. But yeah, looking awesome. Fun deck to play around with. I haven't actually played it against anyone yet. I'm looking forward to doing that soon, though. Probably because they're going to hate life, and I'll enjoy it. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching.